Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, welcome to our talk. We are from Aiimi, me and Josh, and we'll be talking about the value of user experience for artificial intelligence. So just to give a brief overview of what we'll be covering, we're going to introduce ourselves, then we'll introduce some principles of user experience. Then we will talk about Insight Maker and document classification as a case study for UX for AI. Then we will talk about which UX principles we focused on when implementing these AI technologies. And then we'll sum it up with the final quote. So introductions. My name's Luke, and I'm a data scientist at Aiimi, and I work in Aiimi Labs, which is our research and development department.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Yeah, I am Josh Stanley. I'm a product designer in the same product team Luke's just mentioned. We work on our flagship product, Insight Maker. And my role is based around UX, UI, and user research. I think that's enough for now. Yeah, so we're going to start by talking about the importance of UX. And this really is centered around, well, human-centered design. And the importance of that is that it finds the meeting points and the balance between our users, the technology we're using, our businesses, and the design systems as well. But it's also important to take hold of that facet of that approach, because it solves real-world problems. It highlights the value in research whereby we can fully understand the problem at hand, being able to fully understand from the get-go and gather enough insight to be able to build an output and a solution based on the research that we've gathered through that discovery sort of period within the research stage. It drives massive user engagement, obviously, and overall growth, but it also allows us to design for the user and frames how we interpret the world and create synergy between the four. To simplify it a little bit, I'm going to look at someone that I look up to, slightly away from UX, obviously, and as an avid home cook and someone that obviously wants to improve my abilities in the kitchen, I could very easily go in and search for a nice picture of an apple crumble and straight away without knowing very much else regards to the ingredients and how we go about actually doing this. But as following a good UX, as Jamie Oliver always does, he provides a set of ingredients and a very understand methodology and process whereby the users are given the tools to then make their own decisions, and it then applies for them because they can then make what is best for them at that point in time. So what within Insight Maker is very similar, and it's a way that we need to approach life in general, and the way that we do things with our product and with AI is involve the user, make sure that they are constantly working with the AI and with the product to deliver the final product that is best suited to them. Something that all designers are probably quite aware of is this picture. It sort of highlights the fact that design in general, design is thought of as being only aesthetic appeal. As a UX designer, we are constantly trying to fight this. Although making things look pretty is actually part of my job, it's not the end goal. The end goal is to make our user journeys enjoyable, effortless, and more importantly, providing a solution for our users to get from with as little difficulty as possible. Luke, over to you.
Thanks, Josh. So I'll now talk about Insight Maker as a case study for UX in AI. So Insight Maker is an insight engine with compliance functionality, and it helps users to navigate, understand, and manage their company's information. This includes things like documents, data, featured links, and assets. And this screenshot shows a small example of enterprise search, which is one of the features that InsightMaker has to offer. It does have a lot more features, which you can access through aimi.com/insightmaker. And yeah, you can search documents that are crawled through the repositories of information you have in this example. So as some context, this is information enrichment, which is a key process within InsightMaker. So this is the process where we derive additional insights from documents based on their properties. So through machine learning technologies like named entity recognition and classification, from this document, we might derive that it mentions a company, it mentions a person, it mentions an address, a date, an invoice number, the fact that it's a signed document with image classification, and also, most importantly, that it's an invoice document. And this metadata, which we can create for each document, provides a lot of power to the application. So this is the background behind document classification. So we'll now talk about document classification, and we'll talk about what it is and a little bit about how it works, and then we'll go into UX for it. So the goal of document classification is to create a suite of machine learning models that can classify a range of document classifications to a high degree of accuracy. These are things like employment contracts, non-disclosure agreements, invoices, work breakdown sheets, and whatever other classifications your business might hold. There are a number of steps in the solution, but for this presentation, we'll just focus on explaining the elements that really relied on a strong UX to drive engagement and use. So out of the 7-step process we have first pre-processing, then we cluster documents, we label clusters, we create supervisor models from the labeled documents, then we deploy the models, and we employ user feedback to improve the models over time, and then we monitor performance. Out of these steps, we'll focus on cluster labeling and user feedback elements. So some context around cluster labeling. It's a method of extracting, well, clustering is a method of extracting value from an unlabeled data set. So the data sets that clients are often able to provide us are unlabeled, meaning that they have no classifications. So it is possible to have pre-trained models where we can classify documents immediately, but we would like to cater to bespoke document types. So we essentially want to form some document clusters from an unknown data set in order to discover which classifications there are in the first place without assuming any classifications exist. So once we have these clusters, we require subject matter expert involvement in order for them to be labeled and in order for us to basically have a useful data set. So this key process here requires a strong UX, and yeah, we're leveraging subject matter expert information to provide a useful data set to use with machine learning models. So how the models are used, what will happen is for each document, each model will essentially cast a vote, and then the most confident model will determine the classification of the document. So in this context, this invoice model is most confident, and it will determine the classification of an invoice for this document. So as more documents are classified, we want a way to be able to monitor model performance to ensure classifications are appropriate, and collecting user feedback enables us to not only gauge performance, but it can help the models improve over time. So we start off with an invoice model saying that it's confident that a document is an invoice. Then we can review the classification through a user interface, and we can provide feedback. Is it an invoice? Is it not? And then a good thumbs up would indicate that it is an invoice. And we don't need to do this for every document, but as we do this for more and more documents, we can gauge model performance, and we can also, as I mentioned before, have stronger and stronger models over time, which can lead to more useful metadata around documents. So I'll now hand back over to Josh to talk about which principles we employ to deploy the strong user interface we have around this application.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, so I'll be talking about a little bit about how we're using UX to actually drive a stronger AI with regard to our document classification model. The first point being regulating data quality. So it's important to set the right expectation, to explain in plain language what our document classification model can do and where the limitations are. That generally it sets a bar of generally under-promising and over-delivering, which is, in a sense, a good way to build trust for the user. And on that note, building trust between the user and the AI is obviously essential. So by allowing users to be responsible for the data, the models they're trained on, it continuously provides the model with relevant and up-to-date documents. By following an approach, we've set up a method of debiasing our AI with the models are making a fairer decision rather than disproportionately biased ones. It's ultimately up to the user to decide how they want to use that data, and with regard to the taxonomy and the decisions they make within their company, where those documents need to be placed. So when we talk about confidence and the image on screen, the UI that we're looking at, we're actually looking at our document classification app. This is the corrections area. This is where an SME would go in and have the ability to review a document based on the initial confidence level set by our model. So in this case, we have a confidence level of, I think that's 86 for an invoice, which our model has predicted. But based on the SME's understanding and expert knowledge for this invoice or for this document, they can then make that decision, make that final decision whether or not that is the classification that is required to be there. The next principle is tailoring the AI experience. So we need to start with the user. The technology we use should guide the user experience you want to achieve. Instead of diving headfirst into algorithms, I think we need to take heed and think about what people are actually doing on a day-to-day basis. It's vital to figure out what's valuable, what's feasible, and essentially what's the requirements at the end of the day. Keeping the user in control is very important. It's instead of an AI that replaces humans, we need to think of a way to amplify and augment the abilities of that relationship. We shouldn't turn users into spectators, but rather involve that user in the entire process. And that can be by means of intervening, providing feedback, reverse bad actions, and reward good ones. So an AI is more empowering when it works with the user and not for the user. So the core functionality and UX of our classification app gives the ability to make their own decisions. We enhance and mold the experience by being able to classify our documents how they want them to be classified. So in the interface that you're looking at on screen, we have our corrections area as well, where a user now has the ability to, based on that model prediction, actually go about making that final decision whether or not a classification needs to be A, B, or C. And that again then is fed back in the model to help build that intelligence and that understanding for us to further apply where we need the abilities of our model and what the classifications are on certain documents. And lastly, we take a very proactive approach with regards to UX and working with AI. By proactively seeking user, we improve the general user experience. We shouldn't wait for issues to occur or walls to be climbed, but instead provide an intuitive and easy to use experience that promotes feedback and actions change. Not everything should be automated. Most tasks have some parts that are good for AI, but other ones that are really important to be left for humans. Displaying the results within our document classification model helps build an understanding of where those decisions need to be made. So in the example on screen again, we're looking at our cluster labeling toolkit within our Classify app, which gives a really good breakdown of the entities within the documents that are presented within the clusters the model has provided. And these are then used to help identify what that cluster of documents could potentially be in terms of a classification. So to end off, I'd just like to read quite an interesting little quote that I found recently. Artificial intelligence shapes how we think, feel, and behave. It drives the decisions that define our future. We have the responsibility to use this potential for humane technology. Building on AI based on our diverse values and needs requires thoughtful design. UX of AI is the first step to designing personal AIs that empower us. The technology deeply influences our lives, so everyone working on it should think about the user experience of AI. Thank you, guys. If you do have any more questions, please do add them to the QA notes section. More than happy to jump in and help there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And to summarize Luke and Josh's talk, I think this is great how UX and AI can be brought together and close the gaps into data and analytics and the whole AI model itself of the document scanning example that you have shown, how proactive intelligence can be brought in rather than just using reactive intelligence is the key. And empowering the user, I think, by involving into the AI model brings in, more trust to the whole AI model itself. So thank you for your talk, and I hope people have enjoyed and people can connect to you. And thanks, Luke, for the third time you have been a speaker. So thank you, Richard.
Pleasure.